There is a thread. Right now, as you listen to this, somewhere in a museum vault or a private collection, there exists a piece of silk, perhaps no larger than your palm, that was woven in China during the Han Dynasty, carried 5,000 miles on the back of a camel, traded 7 times, passed through hands that spoke languages that no longer exist, and finally buried with a merchant in the Syrian desert 1800 years ago. The sand preserved it. The dryness kept the color. A red so deep it looks like dried blood. A blue that suggests lapis lazuli dust mixed into the dye. If you could hold it, it would feel impossibly smooth, almost liquid, lighter than you expect. This is not fabric. This is distance made tangible. This is proof that the world was never as separate as we imagine. Tonight, we walk the Silk Road. Not the road, there was never one road, but the network, the web, the 5,000-mile conversation between empires that barely knew each other existed. From the workshops of Chang'an where silk cocoons were boiled and threads were pulled finer than human hair, across the Taklamakan desert where entire caravans vanished into sandstorms and were found centuries later perfectly preserved, through the mountain passes of the Pamirs where the air is so thin that fires won't stay lit, into the oasis cities of Samarkand and Bokhara where languages collided and fortunes were made, across the Persian plateau where fire temples burned continuously for centuries, and finally to the Mediterranean shores where Roman senators paid their weight in gold for fabric that seemed to capture light itself. This is not a story about trade routes on a map. This is a story about what happens when desire moves across distance, when luxury becomes necessity, when the exotic becomes essential, and when the work of moving objects from one end of the world to the other creates a kind of civilization all its own. You are a bolt of silk, leaving Chang'an in the spring of 150 CE. Your journey will take 3 years. You will cross deserts and mountains. You will be bought and sold, stolen and recovered, admired and hoarded. By the time you reach Rome, you will have passed through 20 different hands, been carried by camels, horses, yaks, and ships, survived sandstorms, blizzards, and bandits. And you are not traveling alone. With you, jade and porcelain, ginger and cinnamon, steel and paper, ideas and religions, diseases and technologies, stories and songs. The Silk Road is not a road. It is a river of goods and knowledge flowing both directions, transforming everything it touches. Let's begin where the silk begins. Chang'an, spring, 150 CE. The city that will one day be called Xi'an is the largest city in the world. 1 million people live within its walls. The walls themselves are 10 meters high, 15 meters thick at the base, with gates so massive it takes 50 men to close them each evening. You stand in the Western Market District, the area where foreign merchants cluster. The smell hits you first: horse dung and camel musk, cumin and coriander, sweat and sawdust, the sharp mineral scent of raw silk being washed. The sound is layered, haggling in a dozen languages, the percussion of looms in nearby workshops, the braying of camels being loaded, the chant of Buddhist monks from a nearby temple. The silk workshop is not large, but it is organized with precision that suggests generations of refinement. Women, it is always women in the early stages, sort cocoons. The cocoons are small, white, oval, each containing a single thread that can be unwound to a length of nearly a kilometer. But the thread is too fine to use alone. It must be combined with others, twisted, strengthened. The process is secret. The penalty for revealing how silk is made to foreigners is death. This monopoly has made the Han Dynasty wealthy beyond measure. A bolt of silk in Rome costs more than its weight in gold. In Chang'an, it is common enough that even minor officials wear it. The cocoons are boiled. This kills the pupa inside and loosens the sericin, the protein glue that holds the cocoon together. The woman working the boiling pot uses a small brush to find the end of the thread. She pulls gently. The thread unwinds in one continuous strand. Several threads are combined as they're wound onto a reel. The combined thread is still almost invisible, but it is now strong enough to weave. The weaving happens on large looms. The warp threads are silk. The weft threads are silk. The pattern is predetermined by the way the loom is set up, a complex arrangement of heddles and treadles that allows the weaver to create intricate designs, dragons coiling through clouds, phoenixes in flight, geometric patterns that seem to shift as the fabric moves. The dyeing is equally complex. The deep red comes from safflower, cultivated in fields outside the city and processed into a concentrated paste. The blue comes from indigo, imported from India via the southern trade routes. The yellow comes from the bark of the Amur cork tree. These are not simple dyes. They are layered, mordant with alum or iron salts, fixed with tannins from oak galls. The colors will last centuries. A bolt of silk, approximately 40 feet long, 2 feet wide, takes weeks to produce. It is inspected by guild officials who verify the quality. Substandard silk is rejected. Only the finest silk is permitted to leave Chang'an for the Western markets. This is not just commerce. This is reputation. The Han dynasty's power rests partly on the desirability of its products. The silk is rolled, wrapped in oiled paper, packed in wooden chests lined with cedar to repel insects. The chests are loaded onto carts. The carts join a caravan forming at the western gate. The caravan master is a Sogdian, an Iranian people from the region between the Amu Darya and Sir Darya rivers, in what is now Uzbekistan. The Sogdians are the middlemen of the Silk Road. They speak Chinese, Persian, Sanskrit, Greek. They know the routes, the dangers, the officials who need bribing, the bandits who need avoiding. They are merchants, translators, guides, and diplomats. This particular caravan has 50 camels, Bactrian camels, the two-humped kind adapted to cold and altitude. Each camel can carry approximately 400 pounds. The loads are balanced carefully, silk and porcelain on one side, counterweight on the other. The camels are expensive, but they are essential. Horses cannot survive the desert crossings. Donkeys are too weak. Camels can go days without water, eat vegetation that would kill other animals, and navigate terrain that would break a cart's axles. The caravan leaves at dawn. The gate opens, and the camels file through, bells tied to their harnesses ringing with each step. The sound of the bells serves a purpose. In sandstorms or fog, when visibility drops to arm's length, the bells keep the caravan together. If you can hear the bells of the camel ahead, you're still with the group. The first leg of the journey follows the Heshi Corridor, a narrow strip of habitable land between the Tibetan Plateau to the south and the Gobi Desert to the north. This corridor is the only practical route out of China toward the west. It is studded with garrison towns and watchtowers, remnants of the Han dynasty's push westward under Emperor Wu a century earlier. The towns are small but crucial. Every 100 kilometers or so, a walled settlement, a well, storehouses, barracks for soldiers. The Great Wall extends this far west, though here it is not the stone wall tourists will one day photograph. It is tamped earth and bundled reeds, but it is functional. It marks territory. It provides warning of raiders. It channels trade through controlled points where taxes can be collected. The caravan stops at Wuwei, a garrison town that has grown into a significant trading post. Here, Chinese goods are inspected and taxed. The tax is paid in silk, a certain percentage of the load. This is how the government maintains the garrisons, pays the soldiers, and funds the bureaucracy that keeps the corridor secure. In Wuwei, the caravan also picks up additional goods: rhubarb root, valued in the West as a medicine, ginger, which will be worth more than silver in Rome, cinnamon bark from the south, already traded north from what is now Vietnam. The caravan is becoming a catalog of Chinese exports. Beyond Wuwei, the landscape hardens. The soil is increasingly alkaline. Vegetation thins to hardy shrubs and drought-resistant grasses. The wind picks up. The wind here is constant, scouring, abrasive. Carries fine dust that works its way into everything: clothing, food, eyes, lungs. The camel drivers wrap their faces in cloth, leaving only their eyes exposed. Dunhuang is the last major Chinese outpost. The city sits at the edge of the Taklamakan Desert, a name that translates roughly as, "You go in, you don't come out." Dunhuang is where decisions are made. The Taklamakan can be skirted by two routes, north or south. Both are dangerous. Both have oases. Both have sections where water is scarce and the distance between safe stops is measured in days of hard travel. The caravan master chooses the southern route. The northern route is faster but more exposed to raids by Xiongnu tribes, nomadic peoples who have been in conflict with China for centuries. The southern route follows the base of the Kunlun Mountains, where snowmelt feeds occasional streams and supports small oasis settlements. Before leaving Dunhuang, the merchants visit the Mogeo Caves, a complex of Buddhist cave temples carved into a cliff face. The caves are recent, begun only decades earlier, but already they are significant. Merchants leave offerings, pray for safe passage, commission paintings. The walls are covered with frescoes, bodhisattvas with serene expressions, celestial musicians, scenes from the Jataka tales. The paintings are made with mineral pigments, azurite for blue, malachite for green, cinnabar for red, gold leaf for halos and divine figures. Buddhism itself has traveled the Silk Road. It originated in India 6 centuries earlier, but it is spreading east along the trade routes, carried by monks and merchants, adapted and transformed as it encounters new cultures. In these caves, Chinese artistic styles are beginning to blend with Indian iconography. This is what the Silk Road does. It moves objects, but it also moves ideas, and the ideas change in transit. The Taklamakan crossing takes 40 days. The oases are survival nodes: Miran, Naya, Khotan. Each is a small miracle of water in an ocean of sand. The oases exist because of snowmelt from the Kunlun Mountains, channeled through underground kanat systems, horizontal wells that tap into aquifers and bring water to the surface without losing it to evaporation. The technology is Persian in origin, adapted to local conditions. Some of these kanats are kilometers long, maintained by specialists who descend into the tunnels to clear blockages and repair cave-ins. Khotan is the largest of the southern oases. The city is prosperous, built on jade mining and silk production. Here's the secret the Chinese tried to keep: Khotan has its own silk industry. The story, possibly apocryphal but widely repeated, is that a Chinese princess married to a Khotan prince smuggled silkworm eggs out of China in her hair. Whether true or not, Khotan produces silk, though not of the same quality as Chinese silk. The local silk is coarser, less lustrous, but it is cheaper and available. Khotan is also a crossroads of cultures. The population is Indo-European, related to the Persians and Indians, but they have adopted Buddhism, Chinese administrative practices, and artistic styles from all directions. The king mints coins with Chinese characters on one side and Kharosthi script, an Indian writing system, on the other. The temples contain statues that blend Greek sculptural realism with Indian iconography and Chinese decorative motifs. The caravan rests in Khotan for a week. The camels are checked for injuries and parasites. Loads are redistributed. Water containers are refilled. The merchants visit the jade market, where stones in shades of white, green, and the prized mutton fat yellow are bought and sold. Jade does not originate in Khotan. It comes from riverbeds in the Kunlun Mountains, but Khotan is where it is worked, carved into ornaments, ritual objects, and tools. Leaving Khotan, the route bends northwest, skirting the western edge of the desert. The terrain shifts from sand dunes to gravel plains, easier for the camels but exposed to wind that reaches speeds high enough to strip skin. The caravan travels early morning and late evening, resting during midday heat that can reach 50 degrees Celsius in summer. Kashgar marks the western edge of the Taklamakan. The city is a hub, a place where multiple routes converge. Merchants coming from China meet merchants coming from Persia, India, and the steppes. Languages collide: Chinese, Sogdian, Persian, Tocharian, an Indo-European language spoken in the Darim Basin, Sanskrit, Turkic dialects. The market is chaos, but it is organized chaos. There are sections for different goods: textiles in one area, spices in another, animals in a third, metals and weapons in a fourth. Here, the silk is sold for the first time. The original Chinese merchant who brought it from Chang'an does not continue west. He sells his entire load to a Sogdian merchant who specializes in the western routes. The price has already tripled. In Kashgar, one bolt of high-quality silk trades for approximately 10 bolts of lesser silk, or 50 kilograms of pepper, or a trained horse, or a small fortune in silver coins. The Sogdian merchant repacks the silk, mixing it with other goods to diversify risk. If one caravan is lost, he doesn't lose everything. He is sending goods west with 3 different caravans over the next month. This is how Sogdian merchants operate: distributed risk, networked information, family connections across thousands of kilometers. From Kashgar, the route climbs into the Pamirs, the roof of the world. This is some of the most difficult terrain on Earth. Passes reach altitudes above 4,500 meters. The air is thin enough that newcomers suffer headaches, nausea, and shortness of breath. Fires are difficult to light and burn weakly. Water boils at lower temperatures, making it impossible to properly cook rice or sterilize drinking water. The cold is severe. Even in summer, temperatures at night drop below freezing. The caravan members wear layered felt clothing, wool felted so densely it is nearly windproof. The camels grow thick winter coats that will be shed in lower altitudes. Some animals don't survive the crossing. The ones that die are butchered immediately. The meat freezes naturally and is consumed over the following days. The route through the Pamirs follows river valleys when possible, climbing to passes when necessary. The paths are narrow, sometimes only wide enough for one loaded camel. A misstep can mean a fatal fall. Some sections are so steep that loads must be removed and carried separately, then repacked on the other side. There are no cities in the high Pamirs, but there are small communities of herders, Kyrgyz and Waki people who have adapted to the altitude over generations. Their lungs are larger, their blood carries more oxygen. They trade with the caravans, meat, dairy products, and guides who know the safest routes. They also provide yaks, animals even better adapted to altitude than camels. For the highest passes, the cargo is transferred to yaks, which are slower but more sure-footed. Descending the western side of the Pamirs, the landscape opens into the Fergana Valley, a fertile basin fed by snowmelt from the surrounding mountains. The contrast is dramatic. After weeks of rock and ice, suddenly, orchards, irrigation channels, fields of wheat and barley, villages with gardens. The Fergana Valley is famous for its horses. These are not the small, hardy steppe ponies but larger animals, powerful and fast, said to sweat blood, likely a result of parasites or a genetic trait causing skin lesions. The Chinese covet these horses for military use. Entire diplomatic missions have been sent to secure breeding stock. The horses are expensive. One horse can trade for 40 bolts of silk, but for cavalry, they are invaluable. The caravan does not stop long in Fergana. The valley is contested territory, frequently fought over by various powers. The current rulers are allied with the Kushan Empire to the south, but alliances shift. Merchants prefer to keep moving. Samarkand rises from the plain like a mirage made permanent. This is the heart of Sogdiana, the homeland of the merchant people who dominate Silk Road trade. The city is ancient. Settlements here date back over 2,000 years, but it is currently thriving under Kushan influence. The walls are thick, the gates are decorated with glazed tiles in blues and greens, the citadel dominates the skyline. Inside the walls, the city is organized around commerce. There are caravanserais, large courtyards surrounded by rooms where merchants can stay, store goods, and conduct business. The caravanserais are built to a standard plan: a single gate that can be secured at night, a central courtyard with a well, 2-story buildings on all sides with the ground floor for animals and storage, the upper floor for living quarters. The bazaar is the city's heart. It sprawls across multiple blocks, covered in some sections with awnings or wooden roofs, open to the sky in others. The organization is by product. Silk merchants cluster in one area, spice merchants in another, metalworkers in a third. This is not accidental. It allows buyers to compare quality and prices easily, and it creates competition that keeps standards high. In the silk section, the quality control is visible. Merchants unroll bolts, hold them up to the light, check the weave density, test the drape. Chinese silk commands the highest prices, but Sogdian, Khotanese, and even some Persian silk is also traded. The differences are subtle but real. Chinese silk is finer, more uniform, holds dye more evenly. It is also more expensive, sometimes by a factor of 5. But Samarkand is not just a place where goods are bought and sold. It is a place where goods are transformed. Raw silk is woven into finished garments. Dyes imported from India are applied. Embroidery is added. Sogdian embroidery is distinctive, featuring vine scrolls, animal motifs, and geometric patterns different from Chinese styles. A bolt of silk from Chang'an might arrive plain and leave Samarkand as an embroidered robe worth 10 times the original price. The city is also a cultural blender. Zoroastrian fire temples stand near Buddhist monasteries, which stand near Christian churches. Nestorian Christianity has reached this far east, brought by merchants and missionaries. There are also Manichaean communities, followers of a syncretic religion that blends elements of Christianity, Buddhism, and Zoroastrianism. On any given day, the streets contain people speaking a dozen languages, wearing clothing styles from across Eurasia, worshipping different gods under different names. The Sogdians themselves are Zoroastrians primarily, though many are pragmatic about religion. They'll pray in a Buddhist temple if it's convenient, attend a Christian service if it's good for business. Their primary loyalty is not to any god but to the network, the web of family and commercial connections that spans from China to the Mediterranean. Sogdian colonies exist in every major city along the Silk Road. These are not just trading posts but permanent communities. They maintain their language, their customs, their accounting methods. They educate their children in multiple languages. A young Sogdian might be born in Samarkand, apprenticed in Chang'an, conduct business in Kashgar, and retire in Ctesiphon, the Persian capital, all while maintaining connections to the family network. The communication system is sophisticated. Letters are carried by professional couriers who travel with caravans, delivering messages for a fee. A merchant in Samarkand can send a letter to his brother in Chang'an and receive a reply within 6 months. For urgent matters, there are faster couriers who travel light and change horses frequently, covering the distance in half the time. The letters that survive, many were found in ruined watchtowers along the route, reveal a world of complex business dealings, family obligations, complaints about dishonest partners, advice to younger relatives, and detailed information about market conditions in distant cities. They are written in Sogdian script, a flowing cursive that is efficient to write and difficult for outsiders to read. This is deliberate. Commercial information is valuable, and secrecy is a competitive advantage. From Samarkand, the route continues west across the Oxus River, Amu Darya, into Persian territory. The Oxus is broad and dangerous, subject to seasonal flooding. There are several crossing points, usually by ferry, large rafts made of bundled reeds, capable of carrying camels and cargo. The ferries are expensive, but there is no alternative. The river is too deep and fast to ford. The Persian Empire, currently the Parthian Empire, though it will soon be replaced by the Sasanians, controls the western half of the Silk Road. The Persians do not produce silk, but they are key intermediaries. They add value by transporting goods, providing security, and connecting the eastern trade routes with the Mediterranean world. The Persian section of the route follows a series of cities along the southern edge of the Central Asian steppes: Merv, Nishapur, Hekatompelos. These are large, prosperous cities with populations in the tens of thousands. They are built around qanats and sophisticated irrigation systems that make agriculture possible in semi-arid conditions. Merv is particularly significant. It is one of the largest cities in the world at this time, a center of learning and culture. The library contains thousands of scrolls in multiple languages. Scholars debate philosophy, astronomy, mathematics. The city has a multicultural, cosmopolitan atmosphere similar to Samarkand but with more Persian influence. Here, silk is transformed again. Persian dyers specialize in a particular shade of red, Tyrian purple, though the Persian version is made from a different source. The dye is extracted from murex snails, harvested along the Persian Gulf Coast. The process is labor-intensive and produces tiny amounts of dye per snail. The resulting color is deep, rich, and extraordinarily expensive. Cloth dyed with true Tyrian purple is reserved for royalty and the highest nobility. A single robe can cost more than a house. Persian merchants also add their own textiles to the mix. Persian silk is woven with metallic threads, real gold and silver beaten into thin strips and wound around silk cores. The fabric glitters, reflecting light with every movement. This technique will spread west and east, influencing textile production across Eurasia. The route through Persia is relatively safe. The Parthians maintain roads, garrison forts, and caravanserais. Taxes are collected regularly but predictably. Merchants prefer predictability to chaos. A known tax is better than the risk of bandits. The Parthian Empire is in slow decline by 150 CE, but it still functions. The administration is decentralized, with regional lords owing allegiance to the King of Kings but maintaining significant autonomy. As long as taxes are paid and military service is provided when needed, the regional lords are largely left alone. This system works well for merchants, who can negotiate with local authorities rather than distant bureaucrats. The silk reaches Ctesiphon, the Parthian capital, on the Tigris River. The city is enormous, wealthy, and architecturally ambitious. The royal palace features the largest single-span vault in the ancient world, a barrel vault over 30 meters wide, built without any supporting columns. The engineering is sophisticated, using lightweight materials and careful weight distribution to create an interior space that feels impossibly vast. Ctesiphon is where Eastern and Western goods mix most thoroughly. Silk from China, spices from India, incense from Arabia, glassware from Syria, wine from Anatolia, grain from Egypt. The markets are chaotic and multilingual. Price negotiations happen in a pidgin that blends Persian, Aramaic, Greek, and Arabic. Here, the silk changes hands again. A Greek merchant from Antioch purchases several bolts. He is representing a consortium of wealthy Romans who have commissioned specific colors and quantities. The price has increased tenfold since Chang'an. The Greek merchant will transport the silk northwest to Antioch, then ship it across the Mediterranean to Rome. But before leaving Ctesiphon, the silk is inspected by guild officials. Persian guilds are powerful, and they enforce standards. Silk that has been damaged in transit, water-stained, torn, faded, is rejected or sold at a steep discount. The reputation of Persian merchants depends on delivering quality goods. The journey from Ctesiphon to Antioch follows the Euphrates River north, then cuts west through the Syrian desert. This is Roman territory, though the border with Parthia is fluid and frequently contested. Roman roads are better maintained than Persian roads, paved, graded, marked with milestones. Every 25 to 30 kilometers, there is a way station with fresh horses for official couriers. Antioch is the third largest city in the Roman Empire, after Rome and Alexandria. It is a major trading hub, a naval base, and a cultural center. The city is Greek in character. Alexander's successors founded it, but it is now firmly under Roman control. The population is diverse: Greeks, Romans, Jews, Syrians, Persians, Egyptians, and travelers from even farther afield. The port of Antioch is Seleucia Pieria, on the Mediterranean coast. Here, the silk is loaded onto ships. The ships are Roman merchantmen, broad-beamed cargo vessels capable of carrying hundreds of tons. They are not fast, but they are capacious and relatively safe. The Mediterranean is a Roman lake by 150 CE. Piracy has been suppressed. Naval patrols are regular. The main dangers are storms and navigational errors. The voyage from Seleucia to Rome takes approximately 2 weeks under favorable conditions, longer if the weather is poor. The route hugs the coast when possible, stopping at ports to take on water and supplies. The ship carrying the silk stops at Cyprus, Crete, and Sicily before continuing to Ostia, Rome's port. Rome, late summer, 150 CE. 3 years after the silk left Chang'an. Ostia is a chaotic, bustling port. Ships arrive from across the empire and beyond: grain from Egypt, olive oil from Spain, wine from Gaul, marble from Greece, wild animals from Africa, slaves from everywhere. The docks are crowded with stevedores, merchants, customs officials, and opportunistic thieves. The silk is offloaded, inspected by Roman customs officials, and taxed. The tax is significant, 25% of the value, paid in coin. This is one of the ways Rome funds its vast military and administrative apparatus. The merchant grumbles but pays. The alternative is confiscation. From Ostia, The silk is transported up the Tiber River to Rome itself. The city is overwhelming, over 1 million inhabitants, the largest city in the world. The Colosseum is 70 years old. The Pantheon is being rebuilt under Hadrian. Aqueducts bring fresh water from the hills. Insulae, apartment buildings, rise 5 or 6 stories, and the Forum is the political and commercial heart of the empire. The silk is delivered to a workshop in the Subura district, a crowded commercial area where artisans and merchants cluster. Here, Roman tailors will transform the silk into garments: togas with silk borders, stolas, long robes for women, made entirely of silk, undergarments, and decorative hangings. Silk is controversial in Rome. Moralists complain that it is effeminate, decadent, a symbol of decline. Pliny the Elder, writing around this time, complains that Roman gold is flowing east to pay for silk and that Roman matrons walk the streets in garments so thin they might as well be naked. Sumptuary laws occasionally attempt to restrict silk consumption, but they are ineffective. The demand is too strong. Senators and wealthy equestrians buy silk to display status. Silk is a visible, undeniable marker of wealth. A toga with a broad silk border announces that the wearer can afford the most expensive fabric in the empire. Women's silk garments are even more expensive, full stolas of pure silk, dyed in expensive colors, embroidered with gold thread. The final customer is a senator's wife. She commissions a stola in deep red, the color achieved with safflower dye from China, preserved and intensified during the journey. The garment takes a team of tailors 2 weeks to complete. The fitting is precise. Silk drapes differently than wool or linen. It flows, catches light, reveals and conceals simultaneously. When the stola is finished, it weighs almost nothing. It can be folded into a package small enough to fit in 2 hands. Yet it represents 3 years of travel, 50 different sets of hands, technologies from a dozen cultures, and a price that could feed a Roman family for a year. The senator's wife wears it to a banquet. Other women notice. They ask where she obtained it. New orders are placed. The cycle continues. But the Silk Road is not only silk. Moving west alongside the silk, paper, invented in China and spreading slowly westward. It will eventually replace papyrus and parchment, transforming record-keeping, literature, and administration. Gunpowder, discovered by Chinese alchemists seeking immortality elixirs. It is still centuries from military use, but the knowledge is spreading. Porcelain, a ceramic technology that produces translucent, resonant vessels that seem almost magical to Western eyes. The formula is secret, and it will remain secret for over 1,000 years. Moving east, glassware from Syria and Egypt, technologies that exist in China but are less developed. Glass bottles, glass beads, glass mirrors. Wool textiles from the Mediterranean, heavier and coarser than silk but warmer and more practical for most uses. Linen from Egypt, the finest in the world, preferred for undergarments even in China. Gold and silver coins, which are melted down and reminted but also valued for their metal content. Grapes and wine. Wine culture spreads east along the Silk Road, and by the Tang Dynasty, Chinese poets will celebrate wine in verses that echo Baksheek themes. Also moving, religions. Buddhism, as we've seen, traveling east from India to China. Christianity, spreading east from the Mediterranean. By the 7th century, there will be Nestorian Christian communities in Chang'an. Islam, not yet born in 150 CE but destined to transform the Silk Road when Arab conquests in the 7th and 8th centuries bring most of the route under the control of the Caliphate. Manichaeism, a syncretic religion that will briefly flourish along the trade routes before being suppressed by various powers. And diseases. Plague traveled the Silk Road. The Antonine Plague, which struck the Roman Empire in 165 CE, likely originated in China and spread westward with the trade caravans. It killed millions, weakened the empire, and contributed to long-term demographic and economic decline. Smallpox, measles, and other diseases moved in both directions, with devastating effects on populations that had no immunity. Technologies moved. The stirrup, invented on the Central Asian steppes, transformed cavalry warfare. Papermaking, as mentioned, revolutionized administration and literature. Water-powered mills, originally developed in the Roman world, spread eastward and were adapted to new uses. Agricultural crops, alfalfa, grapes, and walnuts moved east. Peaches, apricots, and oranges moved west. Each crop adapted to new environments, creating new agricultural possibilities. Mathematical concepts, the decimal system and the concept of zero, developed in India, spread both east and west, transforming mathematics, astronomy, and commerce. Astronomical knowledge, observations from Greek, Indian, Persian, and Chinese astronomers were shared, compared, and synthesized, improving calendars and navigation. Artistic styles, Greco-Buddhist art, which blends Greek sculptural realism with Buddhist iconography, develops in Gandhara, modern Pakistan and Afghanistan, and spreads along the Silk Road. Chinese landscape painting influences Persian miniature painting, which later influences European art. Musical instruments. The pipa, Chinese lute, is derived from the Persian barbat. The canon, zither, spreads from Persia to Turkey to North Africa. The Silk Road is not a road. It is a civilizational exchange, a 5,000-mile laboratory where cultures collide, blend, and create something new. The routes shift over centuries. The northern route becomes more important during the Tang dynasty, when China is strong and can secure the corridor. The southern maritime routes, from China to India to the Persian Gulf to the Red Sea, carry increasing amounts of trade, especially bulk goods like ceramics and spices. Ships can carry more than camels, and they're faster, though they're vulnerable to storms and pirates. Cities rise and fall. Palmyra, a desert city in Syria, becomes fabulously wealthy as a trading hub in the 2nd and 3rd centuries, then is destroyed by Rome when its queen, Zenobia, declares independence. Samarkand continues to prosper, becoming even more important under Islamic rule. Kashgar remains a key junction. Chang'an reaches its peak during the Tang dynasty, when it is the largest and most cosmopolitan city in the world, with populations from across Eurasia living in designated quarters. The Mongol conquests of the 13th century both devastate and revitalize the Silk Road. The Mongols destroy cities, Samarkand, Bokhara, Merv, but they also create the largest contiguous land empire in history, stretching from Korea to Hungary. Under Mongol rule, the entire length of the Silk Road is controlled by a single political entity, or by closely related khanates. This is the first and only time this happens. Trade flourishes. Marco Polo's journey from Venice to China and back is only possible because of the Pax Mongolica. But the Mongol Empire fragments. The plague, the Black Death, spreads along the trade routes in the 14th century, killing up to half the population of Europe and causing demographic catastrophe across Eurasia. The Ming dynasty, which replaces the Mongol Yuan dynasty in China, is initially inward-looking. The maritime routes become increasingly dominant. The Ottoman conquest of Constantinople in 1453 disrupts the western terminus of the Silk Road. European merchants, seeking to bypass Ottoman middlemen, begin exploring sea routes to Asia. The Portuguese round the Cape of Good Hope in 1488. Vasco da Gama reaches India by sea in 1498. Within decades, the balance shifts. Maritime trade is cheaper, faster, and avoids the political complications of overland routes. The Silk Road doesn't end abruptly. Caravans still travel the routes into the 18th and 19th centuries. Regional trade continues. But the great transcontinental flow of goods and ideas diminishes. The cities that depended on Silk Road trade decline or adapt to new circumstances. Samarkand becomes a backwater. Kashgar remains important regionally but loses its global significance. The caravanserais fall into disrepair. The routes themselves become dangerous. Central Asia fragments into competing khanates. Bandits multiply. The Qing dynasty in China and the Russian Empire gradually absorb the region, but not before centuries of instability. By the 19th century, when European explorers begin traveling the routes again, they find ruins, collapsed caravanserais, buried cities, forgotten temples. Aurel Stein, a Hungarian-British archaeologist, travels the Silk Road in the early 20th century. In the ruins of a watchtower near Dunhuang, he finds letters, Sogdian letters, written on paper, preserved by the desert's dryness for over 1,500 years. The letters are mundane: business correspondence, complaints about dishonest partners, greetings to family members. But they are revelatory. They provide direct evidence of how the Silk Road actually functioned, the human reality beneath the romance. In the Taklamakan Desert, Stein and other archaeologists discover entire cities buried by sand: Naya, Lulon, Miran. The preservation is extraordinary. Wooden buildings still stand. Fabrics retain their colors. Documents are readable. In one house in Naya, excavators find a Han Dynasty official seal, Greek coins, Indian textiles, and Roman glass beads, a single household containing objects from 4 different civilizations. These discoveries transform our understanding. The Silk Road was not a myth or a metaphor. It was a functioning network of trade, communication, and cultural exchange. The objects prove it. The letters prove it. The ruined cities prove it. DNA analysis of ancient remains shows population movement and mixing. Genetic markers from East Asia appear in Central Asian populations. Markers from Europe and the Middle East appear in Chinese populations along the former trade routes. The Silk Road didn't just move goods. It moved people, and those people married, had children, and left genetic traces that persist to the present. Linguistic analysis reveals borrowed words that mark the passage of goods and ideas. The English word silk derives from the Latin sericum, which derives from Ceres, the Roman name for China. Orange comes from the Sanskrit naranga, which traveled through Persian narang to Arabic naranj to Spanish naranja to English. Spinach traces back through Arabic and Persian to Middle Persian, Spanic. Each borrowed word is a linguistic fossil, evidence of contact and exchange. Religious texts show syncretism, the blending of different traditions. Buddhist texts found in Central Asia contain Greek philosophical concepts. Christian texts show Buddhist influences. Manichaean texts blend elements from multiple traditions into something new. These are not simple borrowings but creative syntheses, new ideas emerging from the collision of different worldviews. Artistic analysis reveals the movement of styles and techniques. The flying gallop pose in art, a horse depicted with all 4 legs off the ground, appears in Greek art, then in Central Asian art, then in Chinese art, following the Silk Road. Vine scroll patterns, originally Hellenistic, appear in Buddhist art from Gandhara to China. Chinese cloud motifs appear in Persian and eventually European decorative arts. The Silk Road was not just trade. It was transformation. Every object that traveled its length was changed by the journey, repaired, modified, combined with other things. Every idea that traveled was adapted, reinterpreted, made new. The Silk Road was a 5,000-mile-long engine of cultural innovation. And it worked because people made it work. Not emperors or generals, though they played roles. But primarily merchants, translators, guides, camel drivers, innkeepers, scribes, craftsmen, and countless others whose names are lost but whose collective labor created and maintained the network. The Sogdian merchant who organized caravans. The Chinese silk weaver whose skill determined quality. The Persian dyer whose color mixing was part art, part chemistry. The Bactrian camel, genetically adapted over millennia to survive routes that would kill horses. The engineer who maintained the Khanate systems that made oases livable. The scribe who wrote the letters that kept business networks functioning across thousands of kilometers. Each was essential. Remove any link, and the chain breaks. The Silk Road functioned because thousands of people, most of them anonymous, performed their roles competently, repeatedly, for centuries. Today, the physical traces are fragmentary. The cities are mostly ruins. The caravanserais are collapsed. The routes themselves are difficult to trace, sand and time have obscured them. But the legacy persists. The genetic mixing continues. The cultural exchanges continue, though now they happen at the speed of light through fiber optic cables rather than at the pace of camels through deserts. The goods still move, though now in shipping containers on trains and trucks that follow routes roughly parallel to the ancient Silk Road. China's Belt and Road Initiative explicitly invokes the Silk Road, attempting to recreate the network in modern form. New roads, railways, and ports are being built across Central Asia, connecting China to Europe. Whether this succeeds or fails, the symbolism is significant. The Silk Road has become a powerful cultural memory, a reference point for international connection and exchange. Museums across the world display Silk Road artifacts. Chinese silk found in Egyptian tombs, Roman coins found in Chinese graves, Persian glass in Japanese temples, Indian statues in Chinese caves. Each object is a small miracle of survival, evidence of journeys that seemed impossible, connections that seemed improbable. The British Museum holds silk fragments from the Taklamakan. The Metropolitan Museum in New York displays Sogdian silver. The National Museum in Beijing contains Roman glassware. The Hermitage in St. Petersburg has Scythian gold that shows Greek influence. These are not merely artifacts. They are proof that the world was never as divided as we imagine, that people found ways to connect across vast distances, that desire for beauty and novelty and knowledge was strong enough to overcome the barriers of desert, mountain, and cultural difference. In the oasis cities that still exist, Kashgar, Samarkand, Bokhara, markets still function. The goods are different now, but the basic pattern persists. Merchants displaying wares, buyers comparing quality and prices, haggling, transactions in multiple currencies, tea shared as negotiations proceed. The caravanserais are tourist attractions now, but a few still provide lodging. The buildings remember. The mountains haven't changed. The Pamirs are still brutal in winter, still magnificent in summer. The passes are still narrow and dangerous. The Taklamakan is still a desert that swallows the unwary. The Tian Shan still catches snow, and that snow still melts into streams that make oases possible. The descendants of the Sogdians, now called Tajiks and Uzbeks, still live in Central Asia. They no longer dominate trade, but they remember the stories. They remember that their ancestors were the middlemen of the world, that Sogdian was the lingua franca of the Silk Road, that their cities were cosmopolitan centers when most of Europe was fragmented and provincial. The Chinese still produce silk, though now it's mostly industrial, made in factories rather than workshops. But in a few places, traditional methods persist. Small workshops where cocoons are still boiled, threads are still hand-reeled, looms are still manually operated. The silk they produce is expensive, niche, but it exists. The knowledge hasn't been completely lost. The route itself is being walked again, by adventurous travelers who want to follow in Marco Polo's footsteps, by archaeologists looking for new sites, by journalists documenting the Belt and Road Initiative, by historians piecing together the details of how the network functioned. And sometimes, in a museum storeroom or a private collection, someone rediscovers a piece of silk, a shard of pottery, a coin, a letter, some small object that crossed the Silk Road centuries ago and has somehow survived. It is cleaned, catalogued, studied. New techniques reveal new information. DNA analysis might show where the silk fibers originated. Chemical analysis might identify dyes and their sources. Radiocarbon dating might narrow down the time period. Each object adds a small piece to the larger picture. There is a thread. It connects Chang'an to Rome, but it also connects past to present, desire to fulfillment, isolation to connection. It is woven from silk and camel hair, from gold coins and glass beads, from spices and ideas, from languages and religions, from the sweat of workers and the ambition of merchants, from the patience of craftsmen and the courage of travelers. The Silk Road was never just about silk. It was about the human drive to reach beyond the horizon, to obtain what is not available nearby, to see what is on the other side of the mountain. It was about the willingness to endure hardship for profit, beauty for status, knowledge for its own sake. It was about the realization that the world is large but navigable, dangerous but manageable, diverse but comprehensible. That people separated by thousands of kilometers and speaking different languages can find ways to communicate, to trade, to coexist. That the exotic can become familiar, the foreign can become understood, the distant can become connected. The empires that built and secured the Silk Road are gone. The Han dynasty collapsed. Rome fell. The Parthians were replaced by the Sasanians, who were conquered by the Arabs, who were displaced by the Turks. The Mongols rose and fragmented. The kingdoms and khanates of Central Asia were absorbed by larger powers. The merchants who organized the caravans left no monuments, no inscriptions proclaiming their greatness. But the connections persist. The genetic mixing persists. The borrowed words persist. The artistic influences persist. The technologies that spread along the Silk Road, paper, printing, gunpowder, the compass, transformed the world. The religions that traveled the routes, Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, shaped civilizations. The Silk Road proved that humanity is one network, not separate units. That ideas and objects and people can move across any distance if the desire is strong enough and the organization is sufficient. That luxury can become necessity, the exotic can become essential, the foreign can become familiar. Every time you wear silk, you are participating in a pattern that began thousands of years ago. Every time you use paper, you are benefiting from technology that traveled the Silk Road. Every time you eat a peach or an orange, you are consuming fruits that migrated along those routes. Every time you use a number system with 0, you are using mathematics that was synthesized and spread by Silk Road scholars. The thread is still there. It connects you to the Chinese silk weaver, to the Sogdian merchant, to the Persian dyer, to the Roman senator's wife, to the Bactrian camel, to the engineer who maintained the khanate, to the scribe who wrote the letters, to the monk who carried sutras, to the explorer who mapped the routes, to the archaeologist who excavated the ruins. The route is still there, beneath the sand, beneath the pavement, beneath the railways and highways. It exists in memory, in museums, in genetic markers, in borrowed words, in artistic styles, in the objects that survived. The Silk Road is not past. It is prologue. It is proof that connection is possible, that exchange is beneficial, that the human desire to reach beyond borders, geographical, cultural, linguistic, is older than empires and more durable than stone. The desert preserves. The mountains remember. The cities, though ruined, still speak if you listen carefully. And somewhere, in a vault or a private collection, there is still a piece of silk, impossibly smooth, improbably colorful, unbelievably old, that crossed 5,000 miles, passed through 20 hands, survived wars and storms and time itself. Hold it up to the light. See how it catches the sun, how the color shifts, how the weave is so fine you can barely see the individual threads. This is distance made tangible. This is connection made visible. This is the proof that the world was never as divided as it seemed, that people found ways to bridge the gaps, that beauty traveled, and that what began as luxury became a thread that binds us still. The Silk Road is not dead. It is sleeping, waiting. And perhaps, in the caravans of the future, whatever form they take, the same patterns will emerge: the desire to connect, the willingness to journey, the belief that what lies beyond the horizon is worth the hardship of the road. The water flows. The mountains stand. The thread endures.